When you're doing play-by-play in baseball, what's the primary goal that you want to impart to the viewer or listener?
Well, I think in baseball and in all sports, my philosophy has been, people have asked, what is your game plan? Is to personalize the number. That my job is to help the audience to care about the performer. He's more than number 7 or 85 or 21. Who is this person? And I go back to my mother. She used to say, well, I was listening to the game, and I just thought that was so interesting about that one player, and he played the cello when he's in the 7th grade, and he had to help out because he didn't have a father, so he became the father for his, and so I was rooting for him the whole game. Well, that became my mother's story, so that as I researched for a game and I'd get a background of a individual or a coach or a player or whatever that had that kind of personal story, those were my little nuggets that I would save, hoping that there were others out there that felt the same way, that now they cared more about the star of the team because they knew something more than his statistics. And in baseball, it's the same. There's more time in baseball to do that than any other sport. But I received a wonderful piece of advice before doing my very first Major League Baseball game with the Angels in 1969. Fred Haney was the general manager of the Angels. When I was a kid during the war, he was the announcer of the Hollywood Stars and L.A. Angels. He was the play-by-play announcer. His final line was always, and this is Fred Haney, rounding third and heading for home. So he knew the craft of play-by-play. He was also a manager of the Milwaukee Braves and beat the Yankees in the World Series. So, and now he's the general manager of the Angels. So I'm very nervous, I'm about to do my first play-by-play of a Major League game, playing Kansas City at Anaheim Stadium. Half hour before the game, he comes into the booth. He said, Enberg, I've heard your games in the preseason and spring training. You're going to be fine. So I just came in. I'm going to give you one piece of advice. I'm not going to come back the rest of the season. I'm not going to invade your broadcast booth. It's your sanctuary. But I'm going to give you this piece of advice. Report the ball. Don't tell me what you hope the ball will do or what you think the ball will do, or what it didn't do. Report the ball. And he left. And I said, well, of course, that's what I'm going to do. But what a beautiful little piece of advice, because when the pitcher's on the mound and refuses, and you're on radio, and refuses to throw the ball, and there's nothing happening, the challenge, and all young announcers say, what do you do then? And you report the ball. The ball is hidden behind his back. Now he's taking the ball up. He's rubbing the ball. He's looking up at the stands as he rubs the ball. Now he's up on the rubber, steps off the rubber, tosses the ball up and down in his hand nervously. Now he's back. The ball takes you to the action and to the performer. And I've used it all the time. When in doubt, where's the ball? What is it doing? Now, Fred Haney and that philosophy of only reporting the ball and don't tell me what you hope or think, well, we've advanced beyond that, because that's why we have our analysts and our colormen to be able to do just that. Here's what I think he should do in this situation, or here's the possibility. He could hit and run here, or maybe there's a suicide squeeze coming up. So you can do, and I can even do a little bit of that. And it's better to first guess than second guess. And so I report the ball, but I've wandered into other areas as well.
Speaking about analysts, the challenge of doing a game just by yourself, how does that compare to having someone who's a good analyst beside you, who can, it kind of fills that gap?
Oh, the partnership of someone you like and knows the game intimately. I was asked when NBC hired me in the mid-'70s to do college basketball. They had studied me doing the UCLA games, doing them alone. And they suggested even, we're thinking you do a terrific job. There's no need for you to have a second man. You could call the games by yourself. A nice compliment, but I'm not crazy. And I remembered that in doing boxing, if it weren't for Mickey Davies, I couldn't have done those matches. I had to lean on him and use his expertise. And why did you put these two fighters together? And why is it a bad encounter? What did you do wrong? So that I leaned on the expert. And so in baseball as well when working next to Don Drysdale. Why doesn't he pitch inside? What's wrong here? Why aren't they doing this? And pulling out from somebody who's played the game on the highest level their knowledge that I don't have, but I'm learning from him as well. And to me, a good telecast or broadcast is when I come home saying, you know what, I learned something from my color man today. He taught me something I didn't know before. And so when they said, well, why don't you do it yourself? It worked for UCLA because they always won. You didn't really need too much analysis. But I said, what if the game's 81-41? If you promise me that every game will be 81-80, overtime close, I can handle that. But if you're going to have any games that are lopsided, I want somebody to share the misery. I want to be able to wander away from the game, and that's what we are, the luxury we have of wandering away from the ball when the game isn't good. And that's when you use your personalities and your background and your humor as the challenge to keep your audience. When the game is 9-1 in the fourth inning, there's a tendency for people want to turn off the game. Well, maybe you can be so entertaining that they don't turn off the game. And that's why they're paying us, to do the bad games. Anyone can do the good games. The reason we're paid well is to handle the off-color game, the lopsided game, and still make that interesting and entertaining.
And make it look easy, I guess, too.
Well, it isn't easy.
I know, but to make it look easy is very hard.
Yeah. In fact, my academic background, I would love to do a master's or doctoral thesis, kinesiology, to wire my brain and my heart and everything else during the course of a broadcast to see how many calories am I burning? What is my heart rate? When the brain waves change? Because here's my feeling. I put as much work and effort preparing and doing any game, whether it is a 5-4 thriller, one in the ninth inning, or a 10-1 blowout that the Padres lose, which makes it more difficult because your home team is lost. When I leave the ballpark after that 10-1 defeat, I am totally exhausted. I'm spent. I've been grinding out the broadcast. If they win 10-1, I have worked just as hard, but I feel pretty good. I can't wait for tomorrow. I don't feel tired. And that whole study of what's happening with me physiologically, emotionally, whatever, I'd like somebody to study that because it is a major difference. The outcome of the game really impacts my physiology.
Who are some of the greats you sat beside announcing baseball, and who do you feel like you've clicked with, had the greatest chemistry with?
Well, Don Drysdale was my partner for 7, 8, 9 years, and he was fantastic. Not only as a pitcher, he knew that aspect of the game inside out, but he was one of the best hitting pitchers, so he knew how to hit. He had a great sense of humor, a marvelous storyteller, which it pays off in baseball. There's some big patches of time that need to be filled. And on top of all of that, Don, I took the game seriously. I hate to lose. It's not a good quality of mine. And anyone who's played golf with me or tennis with me knows I can be a real pain. And I'm trying to get better, but I'm not going to give it up. I want to win. I don't like losing. Well, Don, we would have some really tough years, not just weeks, years, where the Angels would get into their losing pattern and be deep in last place, languishing there happily ever after. And you've got to call those games when they don't mean anything. And we'd lose again, and the game would be over. And he called me Professor. He said, Professor, come on, forget about it. They lost. If so, they don't care. Why should you care? I'll buy you a drink. And he never let me get down. His glass was always half full. He was always happy. And to have that quality, to be able to work with somebody that makes you feel good every day, I miss him deeply. He was a dear, dear friend and a great broadcaster.
In the early 70s, you did a couple of shows I want to mention that were not, the typical announcing shows. These were different shows. One was Sports Challenge. Tell me about the Sports Challenge.
Well, that in the early 1970s, the producer Jerry Gross from New York was a big sports trivia man, and he felt you could build a TV show around sports trivia. And his idea was to get 3 members of one team against 3 members of another team. Doesn't have to be the same sport. They play sports trivia quiz, and then at the end of the show, you have a mystery guest that might have enough points. You got 60 extra points if you got the mystery guest, and that could swing the match from one side to another, and then the winners would stay on and play another team the next week. And they taped these shows at Channel 5, and because of that, perhaps he heard about me, and he asked me if I'd like to be the MC. And was not only emceeing the shows, but I because of my academic background, I helped write the questions and did some of the producing as well in that regard. And it was a syndicated show that became very, very popular, and you could not do it now. You could not afford it. I think we paid the athletes. They paid the athletes $300. I mean, they won't spit on the cement for $300 today. But they would come out, and we got everyone. And 3 Cincinnati Reds against 3 boxers, 3 New York Giants football players against 3 Olympic champions. And we had these matches, did over 100 shows. They would play in all the markets at different times on a syndicated basis. And it was probably how I was introduced to the national public. And that was kind of appealing, that people would know me in New York and Detroit, where I came from, and not just in Los Angeles. And that blended into another opportunity. These athletes, it was amazing. We had to do 3 shows a day. We taped 3 shows, and it took maybe 5 hours to do these 3 half-hour shows. Well, the team that lost the first telecast would still stay in the green room. So by the end of the day, we had to have 4 teams, that's 12, to do 3 shows. And then we had 3 mystery guests. So we had 15, I mean, we're talking Hall of Famers in one room at one time. And we had food and drinks, and friends would come in, and they wouldn't leave. They'd stay, and because a football player would want to ask a baseball player, well, what do you do in this situation? And Raymond Berry, I can remember him running out of the studio when Joe DiMaggio left to try to get his autograph. And somebody said, well, what really happened there? And so we came up with the idea, the way it was. And it all stemmed from Johnny Pesky, who was the shortstop for the Boston Red Sox in 1946 in the World Series, and the key moment when Enos Slaughter of the St. Louis Cardinals was at first base with 2 outs, and I think it was Harry Walker hit a ball into left center field, and on the relay in, Slaughter daringly didn't just go to third. It wasn't a ball all the way through to the wall. It was a ball that was fielded in left center field, continued to run, and Pesky got the relay at shortstop and hesitated, threw home too late. Slaughter scores, and the Cardinals win and win the World Series eventually. And so somebody said to Pesky, hey, you were the GOAT in that 46 game, right? You got the slow relay. He said, let me tell you how it really was. And he told the story, which really implicated the center fielder, not him. I'll take 10 feet of the 90 feet. He deserves 80 feet. No one even knows the damn guy's name, you know. And so we said, why don't we do a show, take the great moments, great events, and have the players and coaches who were part of it come in, and we'll replay that moment. And it won my first Emmy Award as a co-producer, was the way it was, the Yankees, Maris and Mantle, when they battled to hit 61 home runs and break Ruth's record.
And this was on PBS, right? This
on
series.
PBS.
Were you on air? Did you have an on-air role, or were you a producing role for this show?
Well, a little of both.
Okay.
I would do the recreations of if we could get the film often, but the announcer, wasn't connected with it. So I would be calling Jack Johnson boxing matches in 1914, with trying to use a little different voice, and I was recreating football, baseball, basketball, hockey, all the rest. And if we couldn't find the announcer who called that game, let's say when we had a Yankees-Dodgers World Series, well, Mel Allen or Red Barber would have been with Kurt Gowdy, who was the host, would have been there as well to improve the flow. But sometimes there wasn't an announcer alive or whatever. Then I would assume that role too, knowing that I could add some questions with Gowdy.
Game shows. You became known for doing a few game shows. You hosted some. Tell me about that experience of game shows. Did you love games?
Well, it was a job. It was another challenge. I mean, it's Channel 5. They did the first one was Perfect Match, where they would interview young men and young women and put their information into a computer. That had to be one of those big old computers in those days, and then it would spit out. I guess you had 3 men and 3 women, and you had to figure out who was your match. And if you picked the right match and she picked you as the right match, that was the perfect match, and then you won the big prize. The big prize was probably a $50 gift certificate. It wasn't much. And so that was my first experience, and it was okay. I mean, it was another thing to do, and it wasn't what I wanted to be a sportscaster, but this was an opportunity. Well, that led to someone recommending me to the producers of Hollywood Squares. They were going to recreate the old show called Tic-Tac-Toe, and they're going to call it Baffle, give it a different name. And it's a word game. It's a license plate game. You read the license plates, and you'd help your partner to give you the phrase or give you whatever. So I did that for a year, and actually that was pretty exciting. It was big stars were on the show. They actually let me be on Hollywood Squares a couple of times. I had a square and a square. And unfortunately for them, and maybe good fortune for me, because who knows, that might have taken me in a different direction. At the same time, NBC was airing, I think it was 10 o'clock in the morning, Baffle. CBS, at the same time, created their new show with Dick Clark called $10,000 Pyramid. Needless to say, the CBS show went on and on and on forever, and we were canceled after a year or so.
How did you come to join NBC Sports in 1975?
The UCLA entree. And the fact that I had been doing some syndicated basketball games for TVS, a syndicated network, Eddie Einhorn, his creation. In fact, they were the ones who allowed me to be the announcer at the most important game. People say, well, what was the biggest game you've ever called? And I said, well, I've never had the moment like Al Michaels, and do you believe in miracles? And maybe it's still going to happen. But the most important game I was privileged to call historically was the 1968 UCLA-Houston game in the Astrodome, 52,000 fans, biggest crowd ever to see a basketball game, college or professional. Number one, UCLA, the defending champion, unbeaten. Houston, number two, unbeaten. And then it had to happen the right way. The UCLA had to lose. Had they won, it would have been another good game for them to win. But it was a national telecast, and it built tremendous momentum. In fact, so much so that Einhorn literally was handwriting drop-in commercials in the second half for me to read because New York was calling, we want 10 seconds, we want 20 seconds. And it changed the whole course of college basketball. To me, it was the launching pad because never before had a game been shown in prime time that wasn't a playoff game. And it proved that this was a great product, and it has grown ever since. That was the rocket ship for college basketball.
And that was syndicated by TBS at the time? TBS
in 1968. And the only reason I did the game was Eddie Einhorn, who didn't know who I was, in signing the deal with UCLA at the last minute. UCLA said, we want you to use our announcer. And he said, who is he? He didn't know me from a fungo bat. And Dick Enberg, is he any good? Yeah, he's doing our games. So he hired me. He wasn't going to blow the deal, so that's the only reason I got that job. And so that was the most important game. And that's 68. And 75, Einhorn and NBC decided to do their own game of the week. And the logical person was for me to be hired to do that and work with eventually Billy Packer.
And they called that 68 game the game of the century, didn't they?
Well, they should have. They should have. Now,
okay.
I also did the 1979 Larry Bird Magic Johnson game, Michigan State, Indiana State. Everyone wants to give that game credit for being the best game of all time because it had the highest rating. It really wasn't a very good game. Michigan State won that game handily. But that just took the energy from that Houston UCLA game and retro rockets, or whatever you want to call them, sent it into outer space. And that just proved once again that college basketball was this great item. You know, at the time we were doing Game of the Week with Billy Packer and Al McGuire. That was the only telecast all week. It was a big deal. We'd go into a little college town and it was like, this is the game of the week. Now there are 20 games every night. So we hit it at the right time.
Were you hired by NBC to do, at that time, just college basketball, or was the plan to do other sports too?
NBC hired me. That was the entree, college basketball. But I've been doing the Rams games as well and the Angel games as well. So my offer was, hey, I can do all of these sports. So eventually I graduated into their football and worked with Roland Olson, was my first broadcast partner in football a couple of years. I think it was 1977.
Did you have to give up the Rams and the Angel games to work for NBC?
Yeah, I tried to continued doing the Rams games and the Angels while doing college basketball, but I had to give up the UCLA games. I actually, at the time, was the right timing because in 1975, John Wooden left, and while and I'd become almost too, I felt too associated with UCLA. You know, there were too many, hey, we's, that I was being incorporated, the we UCLA, and I thought it was healthy for me to, and it was a great time, and I'm forever thankful to UCLA and the opportunity. I mean, they've made my banker very happy through the years. But it was time for me to move and go to that level playing field again.
When you joined NBC Sports, what was the state of the sports at NBC versus like ABC and CBS?
I couldn't make any comparison there. I mean, it was all to me, it was all this network big. Everything was big and lots of equipment and lots of talent. And you know, I'd been working at KTLA where the basketball game, there was no producer. I was the producer and the announcer, and we had a director. And we get together before the game and say, do you have any ideas? Yeah, I want to show this guy. And if you get a chance to get the coach, he'll do this. And he has this ritual. And that's how we did the telecast. It was a very simple process. There weren't 10 tape machines and an art director and a graphics. I mean, you look back at those old graphics, and it looked as if somebody typed it in on an old Remington. But here's the network. I mean, this is the big time, and that's all I could feel.
Who do you think are your best partners announcing NCAA basketball at NBC?
Well, the team, and we were only together 4 years, Billy Packer and Al McGuire. Al McGuire won the national championship with Marquette in 1977, and then he joined us in 1978. And he was a loose cannon, and he knew that the only reason NBC hired him was because he was this clever, quotable coach who could rant and rave and get a lot of technicals and be quite a showman. And in fact, Packer and I had been doing the games for a couple of years. Now they had Al McGuire. And the first 7 or 8 games, NBC was worried about maybe McGuire taking off and doing something that might embarrass the network. So they didn't even put him at courtside with Packer and myself. They found a room in the arena where he would sit. They had a camera there to shoot him. He had a monitor and a button that he could push. Then a light would come on in the director's booth, and a light would come on at press level for us to see that he wanted to add something. Well, by the time Al saw something that was interesting, press the button, and the director could get a shot of him to explain it, and then for us to quiz him. And that was 2 plays ago. I mean, there was no way to relate to it. And he's in a bathroom someplace in an arena. As he said, my voice is echoing off the walls like I'm in prison. And it was Packer who said, hey, we've got the best bench coach in the game, and we got him sitting in a bathroom somewhere. He can't even see the live action. Get him out here with us. And so they brought McGuire out with us, and many feel that if not the best, it's certainly one of the best broadcast teams ever. But it was McGuire who was the star, and both Billy and I knew that. But Al didn't know television, so he relied on us so much, so he never got too big for his boots. And so it all worked. I mean, they allowed me to do the nuts and bolts and be the MC of the games, and Billy was, knew all the players and the strategies and the history of the game, and Al just reacted to the game and argued with Billy. And people loved that because they never saw the same game the same way. And it was a beautiful chemistry. And maybe one of my favorite compliments, at the time I was also doing NFL football for NBC, and the Super Bowl came up. So I worked all the way through the Super Bowl before joining the basketball team. So in the meantime, while I was gone, several different announcers were used by NBC to replace me. And when I came back, the first thing Al and Billy did, they sat me down. They said, listen, while you've been away, we have just run over the other guy, your replacement. I mean, it's just been Billy and Al show. And if he got in the way, too bad. We're galloping. And we want you to know that you're running the show, and you're back now. You rein us in. You don't let us, make fools of ourselves. And I thought, gee, that's why we like each other. That's why we're a good team.
Yeah. Speaking of the NFL football, you were paired with Merlin Olsen. How was that partnership?
Well, it was working with the Phi Beta Kappa every Sunday. I prided myself in my preparation, and in my career, I've never seen anyone work harder to be ready for a game other than Merlin Olsen. He was an all-A student. He was an academic All-America and Phi Beta Kappa. And Merlin's preparation was just extraordinary. He would have legal yellow pads filled out. Here's yours, Enberg. Here are things that I would feel very comfortable talking about that may happen in the game. Mr. Director, here's your yellow pad. Here are some shots that would really be unique that I know about this player and this play or this whatever. Mr. Producer, here's some replays that and have those all ready for everyone, doing all that work for him. And then you can imagine then the preparation for himself. And generous all the time. I mean, he was to a fault. He was. I've met in my career just a couple, three people that God doesn't make anyone perfect, but came really close. John Wooden is one. I always introduce Coach Wooden as a man of greatness and goodness, and he was all of that. Such a fantastic person. And Merlin Olsen was this physical specimen he was like a 180-pound man that had been blown up by 100 pounds, that still everything was perfect. Shoulders in line, big legs, everything. It wasn't like, usually big men, their neck's too long or their legs are too thin or their belly's too. Merlin was this perfect Adonis that had this great brain. He was the sound mind and a sound body. They could put Merlin Olsen's picture on that, and it would have been more than proper.
Was calling the Super Bowl the first time for you more exciting, or did you take it as like, here's just another assignment, it's another game?
Oh, you can't take the Super Bowl lightly. Actually, it's probably the least enjoyable game to work. You go through a whole season, you do your game, you have a certain rhythm, you and your partner and your producer and director, and then you do a Super Bowl and 140 million people are going to watch. And now there are, instead of 10 cameras, there are 30 cameras. Instead of 10 tape machines, there are 28 tape machines. There's 2 weeks of total hell beforehand. It's not only the players that are badgered for interviews by the nation and world press. They even want to talk to us. Well, no one talks to us all season long, maybe a reporter now and then. And there's so many activities pulling you away from your preparation time to get ready. The phone's ringing. You finally have to turn that off to get ready for the game and do it your way. And then to try to position yourself to call the game the way you've called it all season long. When you have the challenge of an audience now that's 2 or 3 times larger than any during the regular season. So you're not talking just to people who know NFL football. This is a social event, and you're trying to explain a game to millions and millions who know very little of the subtleties of football. So you don't want to be condescending to your real football audience, but you can't ignore those that you're trying to entertain and educate as well. So that is the challenge of the Super Bowl. And just like the players, you can't wait for the kickoff. And once the game begins, you get lost in the game and everything seems quite normal again.
Tennis coverage. You became synonymous with network television tennis coverage at some point. What was that experience like for you? Was tennis a sport that you even loved or liked at that time? And people thought tennis, they thought Dick Enberg.
Well, that's quite an incredible journey, because as a kid growing up in our farm town of 800 people in Armada, Michigan, if my dad had caught me with a tennis racket in my hand, you know what I would have gotten with that? Just bend over. I'll tell you how we're going to use this tennis racket. That's a bunch of monkey business. That's how he would have talked. Again, there were so many people in my life that have been so kind and considerate and generous. And I hope in turn that I can return those favors and give back as well. I hope I have in my career. I'd be ashamed if I haven't. And here's another case in point. Bud Collins is a human encyclopedia of the sport. Knows more about it and its history. He played it, he coached it. Then you can find 10 others. We'll do a test. I got Bud Collins. You pick 10. I'll take Collins, and we'll win the test. So he's doing the play-by-play for NBC. They had not done live television of Wimbledon prior to 1979. They did tape shows. Jim Simpson was one of the announcers. And Bud Collins would do the mini play-by-play. They'd take snippets of play-by-play and put it into their shows. But there was never a full match. Well, I've advanced, and by 1979, I guess I'm the #1 guy at NBC. And they decide to do live the Wimbledon finals, the men's final. And they said, well, we can't, we got to make this, the audience know that this is important, so we'll send Enberg over there. Now, I have casually played tennis, and like all the other sports, I followed it. But in terms of the intricacies and the subtleties, and even the lexicon of the game, you know, first thing, somebody that doesn't know tennis says, boy, that was quite a rally, when they meant volley. I mean, and then right away, they don't know what they're talking about. So I'm just worried that I'm going to make a mistake like that. But they don't know what to do with me. Collins is the play-by-play man. Donald Dell is the color man. And I'm over there, I guess, as the host. So I'll bring us on the air for the first breakfast at Wimbledon. I'll do a few little interviews or pieces, and I'll do the wrap-up. And that's my role. Well, Bud Collins takes me by the hand, literally, and walks me around the grounds of the All England Lawn Tennis and Croquet Club. This is interesting. You may want to talk about this someday. You got to meet this guy. Here's the quick way to get to center court. You don't want to go all the way around to the southeast portal. You can sneak through right by the entrance where the players come out when they. And I would write a piece, and he'd say, Dick, you don't want to say it that way. I mean, that phrase, it doesn't ring right with the tennis. You probably want to say that. I mean, he could have let me die. I could have embarrassed me. He didn't. And eventually they moved me into his seat, and then he became the color man, and we became the team. But once again, forever grateful to Bud Collins. There's some people, his style, it amuses me. Some people actually didn't like Bud Collins. And I said, if you ever met this man, you would be blushing in embarrassment that you have ever said those words, that you don't like Bud Collins. He's about as lovable a guy as you'd ever want to meet. And he just has that style. It's different. That isn't even him. That's another persona that he uses for his television style. But when they hang up the stars in my life, Bud Collins gets one of the biggest.
What was it like working with John McEnroe?
John McEnroe, it was like working with John Miller in golf. Two of the brightest former athletes who have no connection between their vocal cords and their brain. Their brains are full of great information, but there's no filter. What they think is what they say, and what they say is often so brilliant and candid that fans love them. McEnroe, he's mellowed beautifully through the years. Maybe he was hard to like as a player, but as a partner, you always know you're going to get great stuff. And he is so quick of mind that I'll do my usual studying for a match. I've got 2 or 3. I got my notes all written out and all. And where's McEnroe? Is he going to show up for the? They got the final. We got 10 minutes. Where's McEnroe? And about 5 minutes before the telecast, he comes in wiping mustard off his chin, saying, "Where are the notes?" And he'll go through the notes. He'll go, "Okay, let's go." And he's got it all down. Now he's probably doing something else, but he just knows the game so well and the players so well, and says such incredible things. And I think the word is refreshing. Johnny Miller, John McEnroe, they're totally different in terms of aspects of their personality, but in terms of their work on television, they're just refreshing because they're bright and candid.
Your essays about Wimbledon memories became very popular. Why do you think that was?
Well, I think it's because I wrote most of those pieces from the heart, and I love to write. And I'll share the secret that I write to images that I've seen in the event. Most so-called essays or wrap-ups or whatever, you have the material, the editors edit the material, the producer, and then they show it to you, and either someone has written it and you rewrite it, or they say you write it. Well, I do it the reverse. I'll watch an event, 2 weeks of tennis, or an Olympic event, and I will write down, that shot, when he gets angry and he throws his racket, and he did it again, only threw it up this time. Let's mark those, and I'll code my own way shots of emotion, not just great shots, but emotion, maybe someone in the crowd, maybe a parent or someone, that'll fit with the emotion of the player at this particular moment, and match them together, and then write knowing that those shots are available for the producer and editor to put together to back up my words. So I've understood that from early on that the picture is the most powerful aspect of our business. It's not our words. The picture is king, and then we complement the picture. Television, we are really only docents. Radio, you paint the whole canvas. You're the artist in radio, but on television, we just try to advise you as the appreciation of the colors and tones and hues and moods of this visual television picture. And then to write with heart. I'll remember at the Olympics in, I think it was in Barcelona. I found that the Greco-Roman wrestling, I knew nothing about Greco-Roman wrestling, but somebody said, they've just closed down, they've just had the finals, and there was an incredible scene there. We mic'd the wife of the American who was wrestling in the finals. Never before had an American gotten that far in Greco-Roman wrestling. And they brought over all the tapes. So we were looking through the tapes, and Dick Ebersol, the head of NBC Sports, president of NBC Sports, and the head of the Olympics, says to me, "It's a Sunday night, Enberg. We've done 7 or 8 of my Enberg moments. I want you to make them cry tonight." And so we're looking through this footage, and what had happened is they had a camera isolated on the wife in the stands, and she was mic'd, not knowing that their 5-year-old daughter was going to sit in her lap. And the husband, Kolkowski was his name, a chiropractor from Minneapolis, St. Paul, wrestled a young Cuban favorite. And they wrestled to a tie and into overtime, and eventually the younger Cuban wrestler prevailed and won the match. All the time, the little girl at 5 is sitting in her mother's lap with her fingers crossed, rooting for her father. And when their father lost, just breaks out into this emotional tirade of tears. We even had to tone that down. So we set the scene. Here it is, battling for the gold medal, grappling these two. Personified the Cuban star, the Kolkowski doing something no American had done, go back and forth to the wife, told about her, and the little girl was always there, and she was fingers crossed. And when he lost, and she broke down, and my final line was, daddies are not supposed to lose. Mm-hmm. And I came into the studio, and Ebersol said, "You did it."
Was the
World Series. There was only one unhappy time at NBC. We were in Helsinki in 1983 for the World Track and Field Championships, and at that time I was being groomed, I thought, to be the announcer for the World Series in '83. Let's see, maybe I'm trying to get this right here now. You have '82, I did the World Series.
The World Series, right.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to go back and start that over. After doing the '82 World Series, I thought that I was now going to be the head man. Joe Garagiola and Tony Kubek were the broadcast team, and now I was joining them. '83, I'm going to Helsinki to cover the World Track and Field Championships, and bringing all my baseball material with me because I'm going to be away for 2.5, 3 weeks. Want to be ready when we come back for baseball. I get a call to see one of our young producers. Wasn't even an executive. Said, "I got bad news for you. You're not going to be doing the World Series." And I said, "I'm not." And he said, "They've just hired Vin Scully." Well, and I knew Scully's work and admired him, and always have and always will. So if anyone was going to get it, not me. I mean, I can't argue. He's the best. But I was really disappointed. And I would say the only time basically since I joined the network that I've really been hurt. I felt betrayed. And they made amends at the end. And indeed, it probably sent me more into the tennis area and allowed me to do more of the tennis. So only one World Series. I enjoyed doing that, and I hope that my next one will involve the team for whom I work now, the Padres.
For the World Series, because it's such a big series of games, did you find you had to do more preparation just because of kind of the history of the World Series?
Oh, and baseball prepares you for the World Series. Every game, 162 games plus the exhibition season. It's my scorebook is a volume, and in that book is all the information about the players, the games, the insights, the humor, And so that's all building toward the World Series. The reverse of that is after being away from baseball for a long time and then taking the Padre job a year ago, my concern was I didn't have that book in my mind. Baseball is such a daily game, and you play off today what happened yesterday, and the pitchers today pitched against each other 2 months ago. Well, if you don't have that in your book, you can't relate to it. So baseball keeps building from game to game to season, and so that all is the payoff is the World Series. And if you've been working all year, there aren't any surprises. You just go back and pick out the gems, and you polish them and make them ready for your World Series audience.
Moving from network baseball coverage to like the Padres, which is, I guess, they have their own network. Or do you find this a lot to adjust to, or are the basics still in place?
Well, I think being away from the game, I've been, as an announcer, you have to get yourself back in shape. But I've never left baseball. I'm a big fan, and so I followed it. Now I don't. Living in San Diego, I was following. Padres are my team now as a fan. So I knew the Padres, but all of a sudden I'm in a new stadium in Washington or a new stadium in Atlanta that they weren't there when I did the games before. So it's adjusting to the new places. And my partner had to lead me around. I didn't know how to get from the clubhouse to the press box. New players, the only names that are familiar are the names of sons of fathers. Their fathers played when I was doing the games the last time around. So it's all that adjustment. And the baseball being such a personal game that I had to rebuild my book, my mental book about the game. And so even now, after a year and a half, almost 2 years, I'm relating in a game I'll do tomorrow to something that happened more than a year ago that I did. I remember that, and I can go back to it and call it up, and it's appropriate, meaningful to this game's broadcast.
With your lifelong love of baseball, is it still exciting to do baseball?
Every day is exciting. No matter how bad your team's playing and how tough the loss was the night before and how you took it personally and you felt worn out, exhausted by it all, the new day arises, and each day is a season. Hey, today someone might pitch a no-hitter. Going to the ballpark today, and sounds like there's going to be a big crowd, and we're going to get to see this new young phenom from the Pittsburgh Pirates, and it'll be nice to see how he performs, and we can talk about him. So every day is exciting. I really am sincere. I can't wait to get to the ballpark every day.
Well, you had to sustain you were announcing for the Angels back when the Angels weren't,
No, they weren't
as hot as they've been in recent years. But let's talk about golf for a minute. What are the challenges of covering golf, and where are you physically when you're announcing golf? Because it's all over the place, physically, geographically.
Well, baseball is the most difficult game to call, especially on radio. We have to paint the whole picture. But golf is the most difficult for me. It was the most difficult assignment for this reason. In every other sport, I'm in the broadcast booth. I'm seeing the tennis balls being struck side to side. I see the scoreboard. I see the fans, the chair umpire. Baseball, I've got the whole field. I can see into the dugouts. Football, the same. You're watching the ball as it plays. In golf, you are positioned in your broadcast booth only based upon proving to the audience you're at the scene. In other words, it's usually the 18th green behind you. So you have your camera position, or it might be a particular exciting hole or scene at Pebble Beach, let's say. Your back is to the action. So you have monitors in front of you to follow the game. Well, I'm accustomed to seeing it live. And now I'm restricted to only whatever shot the director punches up. And meanwhile, the producer is saying, Enberg, we're going to go to 13. It's Palmer's second shot. What do I say? Now to 13, Arnie Palmer's second shot. No, not 13, 14. Well, I didn't make the mistake. It's just you have no control. And it was very difficult for me. It's really a tough. Now, if that's all you do and you get to know the course and every blade of grass, and like Johnny Miller, and he could sit home on his couch. Johnny Miller could sit home on his couch with a telephone and watch the game watch the golf tournament on television and call it just as well as being on the site, because he's not seeing the live shot anyway. He hears the sound, sees the swing. Oh, that's going to be short to the right, and it's short to the right. But for me, I was parroting back whatever the producer told me to say because I didn't know where they were going. Are they going to go to 13 to 18, back to 5? Are they going to go to the clubhouse? I mean, I had to wait for it to happen, and he would cue me into it. So what I did was stay out of the way. I just took that nice little white ball, put it in a nice yellow tee, and said, Johnny, give it a go. Tee it high and let it fly.
So given you might have a position on the 18th green, and maybe someone is teeing off on maybe the 7th hole, tell me about the golf voice. When a lot of announcers do golf, is it just to set the tone, even though no one would ever hear you that far away from the real action?
Well, I think it's expected. It's part of the theater of it all. So, I would, you don't go to, someone's about to putt for birdie, and it's, 20-foot putt for birdie. You don't come out saying, Palmer, 20-footer, birdie here. Or do you say, 20-foot birdie chance, Arnold Palmer. If he makes this, he moves up 2 shots on the field or whatever, and you use that sacred. Yeah, it's the same voice you use when you welcome you to Wimbledon, the cathedral of tennis in center court. I mean, it's Bill Stern. It's what he did, and your voice dictates a certain mood, I hope, and emotion for the audience as well. And we violate that. And then in golf, when a spectacular shot is made, then to be able to go from that in church voice to your football voice, to an oh my, what a shot, and not jolt your audience is the key.
You talked about that baseball has an opportunity to fill in, tell more stories because it's played out sometimes on a slower pace. Golf is a very slow sport. What is the challenge to keep it exciting for the viewer?
Well, I think the golf is for golfers. That's the first thing that I learned, that they're the most critical audience in all of sport are the golf audience, because they go out after watching a telecast and play golf. Or they may have played golf and then they watch the telecast. People watch an NFL game, they don't go out and play football. You watch a baseball game, you might go out and play catch with your kid, but golfers play and they watch and then they play. And they analyze every breath. And you better be right on. And when I accepted that, I didn't seek the golf job at NBC. They asked me to do it, and I was very careful. I did a little research and asked friends who are golfers, and what is it you don't like about a golf announcer? And they said, well, what happens to you guys is you've got all those experts, not only Johnny Miller next to you, but you have all those at the other holes and the announcer on the course that's right there by the golfer describing a shot. They don't want you to come on and say, okay, here's Palmer, and I think that he's either going to hit a full 6 or choke up a 5. Well, they don't want to hear that from you, even if you're right. So I was very careful about not ever getting into that area. I would ask a question, but not ever suggesting that I knew so much that this is a possible shot about to be engineered. And so, golf was tough, and I thought I passed the test after 5 years. I brought what I thought I do best, and that again is personalizing the athlete and the golfer, and doing my little pieces at the end of the show, wrap-ups, little essays. And a nice little compliment was the second year that I was doing it. One of the golfers, we were in New Orleans, was going between hole 4 and 5, and it was a long walk, but yet he walked way out of his way. We were standing up on a high piece of ground so we could see 3 or 4 holes at the same time, and he just came up and said, been listening to your work, and I just want to tell you, we're lucky to have you. Keep up the good job. And golfers are the most accessible. If all athletes could treat their sport the way golfers do theirs, we'd really have something special. I wish tennis players would study golfers. I mean, they respect the media, they respect the fans, and they respect the game, the traditions of the game and the honor of the game. Golfers by far, as a group, are the best in all sport.
In 1988, you went to Seoul, South Korea to cover the Summer Olympics. Were you covering specific events, or were you kind of the lead host and anchor, or both?
Well, I was doing some essays. I did the basketball final. That he says that they all know now when they make a basket, the director takes a shot of them going back on defense, and they're all showtiming, and the other guys are running right by them. And the U.S. did not win. I did the gymnastics, which was a big Olympic event. Mary Lou Retton was one of Bart Connor and Mary Lou Retton were the experts. And gymnastics, like figure skating, they're very much alike. And a real appeal for me. I enjoy covering an event that has the combination of the artistry, classical artistry. I mean, it's to music and to form, and, as well as being athletic as well. And that combination is, you find that in both figure skating and gymnastics. I'm very fond of both.
Was it challenging, frustrating? What's your feeling about, because of the time difference, the time shift of sometimes, delayed broadcasts of Olympic events?
Oh, we're oblivious to that. I mean, that's complaints from the states or whatever. You're not reading the papers. You don't know. I mean, you're doing the best you can whenever it's being seen, whether it's live or it's on tape. That's totally out of our territory.
When you did the Olympics and you went to Barcelona and also Atlanta for the Olympics, was it an exciting assignment? How did it compare to other specific sports that you covered?
Oh, it's unlike anything else because it is a 21-ring circus, or however many sports there may be, with the whole world competing. And the frustration is it's so big that you can't get your arms around it. And so you do have your individual sport assignments, and many of us were, you have your venue at gymnastics or boxing or track and field. I was fortunate in doing the essays that I had the freedom to be able to go to all the venues and pick, every day was a challenge because you wake up in the morning, what am I going to do today? We didn't write these pieces in advance. Something had to happen. Then we wrote it and got the video to cover it. So, because at 8:30 at night, they're going to play it, the Enberg moment. You better have something ready. But something, every day something comes to you. There's always a beautiful event or beautiful moment, a story to tell. And that's what the Olympics, with all of its activity, provides somebody with an eye for a story.
How did you come to move from NBC to CBS Sports in 2000?
Well, I was selfish, so I said, what do I really love to do? And NBC had lost the rights to the NFL, and I'd been the lead announcer for their football coverage. They had lost the rights to the college basketball tournament, and so I was no longer doing the March Madness. We were occasionally doing a game during the course of the regular season, and CBS had both of those sports in their bank. And I thought, I should be at my age doing the play-by-play of the sports that I enjoy most of all. And if they want to hire me, as much as I don't want to leave NBC after 25 years, and all my friends, they were very, very good to me, as they say, it seemed to be the right move for Dick Enberg.
Okay. And is that what you concentrated on doing? I know you did some golf at CBS also, but was that your joy for you? Was the NFL and also the college basketball tournaments?
Yeah, doing the NFL and the college basketball. Those were the warm blankets, and I felt comfortable having those around me.
In 2004, you covered tennis for ESPN. What was that like compared to when you were at Wimbledon in the days with NBC?
Well, ESPN, it shocked me, frankly. You grow up with the networks thinking that they're the best of the best, and the cables are just the second sisters, and they're coming along, but they can't possibly provide the coverage and the depth that we do. Totally wrong. I mean, ESPN is as good as any place I've ever worked. They have outstanding personnel. Their preparation and how they approach an event and do it in a quality way is to be applauded. And I felt very comfortable. I said, wow, these people are really good. I can do what I've always done, and it's going to be fully supported. And they've been in a world that isn't always sympathetic or empathetic. They did a very nice thing for me this last year. I had decided, because of the baseball, to give up football and give up basketball, which I did last year, and tennis, which this will be my last year at tennis. The U.S. Open coming up will be my last tennis, and I'm just, baseball will be plenty for me to do going down the line, and I want to do it on my terms.
You were telling us that you you're concentrating on baseball now. And these, you basically, I think you were talking about you were on your own terms now. This is what you want to be doing. How do you keep your voice healthy? What do you do to make sure you have the voice?
Well, there's a strain on it. I mean, it's and you can ill afford any viral infection. Bud Collins introduced me to, I don't know why we can't buy them in the United States, but there must be something in there that the Food and Drug Administration doesn't like, but you can purchase them in Canada and in England. Megazones they're called. They're a pastille. Remind me of my kid days when my parents tried to convince me that those whorehound drops actually tasted good. It has that kind of taste. And it's a gelatinous, so it doesn't melt too quickly. You can put it in the corner of your mouth, and it'll last for even during a night if you have a tickle in your throat. Saved my career. There have been times where I didn't think I could even talk, and somehow it loosens up your larynx. I think I'm in good health. I've never been very ill. I've never missed an event in 50 years because of illness. And there have been times when my voice has been weak and maybe annoying to the audience because it's not full, but there's no secret. I just have been well blessed with my father's and mother's genes and good health.
Has technology just added to what you do, or has it changed how you approach your job?
It hasn't changed how I call a game much at all. I think that there are times where I feel it's invasive, but that's overcome by the times that it brings so much more to the body of the telecast, that there's video and graphic material that's there to support the game itself and support what you want to say in a game. So it's better than ever. But there are times where I long for the good old days when you look at some of the old Super Bowl telecasts and there's not all that, I'm going to say junk, all the junk on the screen, that there's just the game. There's not something happening in this corner and something on this corner and a crawl down here. And there are times where I feel like I have to read TV. And I know the new generation is accustomed to multitasking, but there's a beauty in the simplicity of the way the game used to be televised. Occasionally you put in the score. The only thing that's really a major shock is the graphics were so, barbaric almost by our terms today, where they're so fancy, things flying in and colors and smashes and fire and all the rest. But the game itself, the way it's televised, hasn't changed much at all, nor the way it's called.
What advice would you give to an aspiring sportscaster today?
I tell young people who want to be a sportscaster to take every class they can on writing, to learn how to write, to think like a writer, because every broadcast is a piece of theater. Football's a 4-act play, and you set the scene in the first act, and you develop the characters in the play, and then the plot unfolds, and you see how the characters fit within the drama of that plot. And when the murder is finally solved in the fourth quarter, the decision is made, then you're able to tie in all the elements that led into this, that interested you in this theater or this book to begin with, and pull it together and tie up the knot, and so that it's a complete performance. And I've often felt that we have been guilty of neglecting the first part of that book or that play, that we need to take more time to set up the scene and set up the players before we're right into the heavy statistical or strategical analysis. But I'm losing that battle.
How would you like to be remembered?
That I was the fan in the stands with you, that I sat next to you, and we're a couple pals just going over the hitters and talking about the game, and that you feel comfortable, that you that I never I would like to hope that people feel I didn't interfere with the game, that the game dictated what I had to say, and it was much more important than any presence that I had in that telecast. People didn't tune in because I was doing the game. They could tune out if they didn't like the way I was doing the game. And I tell young students that, do you think for a minute that if the Super Bowl was played tomorrow and Bernie Mazzola and Sam Liederkrantz were the announcers, that there would be anyone that would say, I'm not going to watch because Bernie, I don't even know these guys. They don't watch because Dick Enberg did the Super Bowl. But you hope when they turn it off, they felt, I'm glad he did. And he made the game better because He colored it, hued it, gave his personality, his personified the athlete, historically connected, showed a little humor. He enjoyed the game, and it helped me to enjoy the game as well. So if it's on my gravestone, it said, never called for interference, that would be just fine with me.
Thank you, Dick Enberg.
Okay, thank you.